Welcome to a Brief History Conspiracy.
This week, cattle mutilation, the alien hypothesis.
Alright, so if you are new to our channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification and leave a comment. It really just helps out. One of the things we are going to be talking in this episode is about human mutilations, which is something that I didn't know about and terrifies me.
Yeah, and me.
Right, so last week we did an episode and we did about cattle mutilations, and I will just mention firstly we had a few interesting messages about the earthbound explanations for cattle mutilations. And we couldn't think of a reason why government would be doing this. We argued that, well, they would just buy the cows and do it.
And do it secretively. Why would they publicise it and then move the bodies? It doesn't...
Well, one of the theories that's actually come back to us is that they're doing it on purpose because they actually want to generate fear. They want to generate fear. They want people to believe it's UFOs. They just want to distract from what they're doing.
Okay. So is this feeding into the Werner von Braun warning that Dr. Carol Rosin from NASA talks about, where she's saying first they're going to use... what is it? First, they're going to use the Russians.
Yeah, it'll be a war against ideology.
Then it's going to go into a war against terror and terrorism.
Which we're currently fighting.
And then they're going to fake an alien invasion.
It does feel like this is all that building
because
thing.
They've got the tech.
Yeah.
And then they're going to pretend as though it's an alien invasion when it's really just the American government taking control of the world.
It doesn't really work though, because when a lot of these people are interviewed, the cattle ranchers and things, they all believe it's either cults or the government. Most of them don't believe it's aliens. So
do they not?
If it was this trying to build fear or whatever, it hasn't really worked. But it could be a distraction technique, which I could kind of follow.
Actually, that was a flaw in our thinking. Yeah, it could very be well the American government doing it to make people scared as though it is aliens that are doing it,
or something else
to keep them scared.
Generate a mystery, isn't it? To keep people off. Also, I suppose to keep us thinking and wondering. I suppose. And a lot of the arguments is always this is a lot to do with radiation and things, but we're going to talk about that through this episode. So, the alien hypothesis. Now we're going to talk about UFOs because it's always UFOs. All right, it's always frickin' aliens. There's two big names if you put in cattle mutilation UFO into Google, two big names jump back out at you, and it's Chuck Zukowski and Linda M. Howe. So we're going to discuss these guys. Okay. So when I'm doing the research on old Chuck, he was a deputy for New Mexico Police. He was working out of El Paso. He's actually a reserve deputy. So a lot of them talking about that he was a police officer. He wasn't. He was a reserve police officer, which isn't quite the same thing, but near enough. He was actually sacked from that role because he was interviewed following cattle mutilations. He was interviewed by local journalists, and he basically identified himself, or they identified him as a police officer. So the local El Paso Police Department fired him because they said basically it made them look like they were siding with this cattle mutilation UFO theory, and he talked on their behalf sort of thing when he wasn't, so they fired him. Now he talks a lot about this parallel 37, the UFO highway in America, which we'll talk about in another episode. But one of the things I do like he talks about a lot is he now works for Mufon, which is a very well respected alien UFO investigation worldwide
group organisation,
very well respected. He actually wrote their handbook on how to deal with a cattle mutilation, and one of the things he talks about is you have to be very careful when you're approaching a dead animal, because there is like this anthrax thing, and anthrax is a natural, it's like a mould or a, so so one of the things you have to be careful of is that occasionally cows are killed by this anthrax, then you're walking up and start poking it. It can be dangerous, so we need to make sure but then we also need to make sure we're reserving any evidence and that we're not disturbing it. So if we want to find out what's going on, we need to be careful. We need to behave in a sort of
it makes sense
in a scientific way. So he actually literally wrote the handbook for Mufon on that.
Okay. I
respect that. I respect the practical way of thinking and the actually trying to say, right, we don't know for certain what's going on, but the only way we're going to ever find out is if we actually have procedures and we actually do this
follow
properly.
And try and protect people from the anthrax issue and the
evidence. So some of the claims Chuck makes though, he talks about indentations being found around a lot of cattle, mutilated cattle as well. And he says it's not like a crop circle. It's actually like something has sat on the ground and pushed it down. And it's an important measurement here because it's 16 to 20 feet. Everything we're going to talk about today is always something around 16 to 20 feet. Right? Circular indentations in the ground.
Right, okay.
Right. So that's interesting really. And then he also talks about when they've then done ground testing, that there is something different about the positive ion charge of the ground and the ability for the ground to absorb water in the immediate area around cattle is different. But he doesn't really go into a lot of details about what he means by different.
Right, so basically he's implying there's been some kind of... Talking about physical evidence, yeah, I mean, what I was going to say, sometimes they do tests at some of these sites where cattle have been mutilated or crop circles are formed, and use Geiger counters and find radiation significantly over the background, microwave background radiation that's obviously there from the Big Bang.
Which when you start seeing evidence like that, you start to worry, don't you? But my problem with it, he doesn't go into loads of details, but he does bring out some cases. He talks about Wallensburg in 2014, where 8 cattle were found dead, seemingly all lying in the same direction, all mutilated in the usual way, and people in the area did see lights in the skies. They did see the black helicopters. They did see all the things that go with.
You can rule out predators because predators don't line 8 cattle up in exactly symmetrical, uniform
OCD
formation. No.
So
predators don't do that.
No.
So it's not predators that are responsible for that. So you've got 8 cattle mutilated in a line, all with no blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty much where you can pretty much put it down to 2 things.
It's an odd frickin' case.
Something intelligent has done this. Whether that's earthbound intelligent or non-earthbound intelligence that's done it, that's the only thing that's really left to debate there, isn't it?
Yeah, and when he does talk about certain cases as well, he tries to talk about cases where local authorities have actually done the research and come up with weird stuff. Like 1976, local county sheriff, they reported a cattle mutilation, and the police reported that predators wouldn't go within 20 feet of the this 20 feet number again, within 20 feet of the carcass. That's actually quite common when, if it was that it is anthrax, because cattle, this coyotes and things seem to know. The cow doesn't seem to know when it's eating the anthrax, but other predators and things seem to know.
Yeah, other predators will avoid the bad body, basically, a contaminated body. They know, don't they?
But also, if there was some sort of radiation, they'd know. Animals are very good at, certainly predators and things, particularly where their senses are what they survive on.
Yes.
It tend to be quite good at knowing when
something's
bad.
When something's bad and not going near it. Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, completely.
And again in 1976, heart, lung and kidney samples were tested by a Dr. Susan Coulter, who was a vet. And she reported that the samples turned to mush really quickly, within a couple of days. That screams to me radiation.
Breaking down on a cellular level, it's destroying the DNA contained within individual cells, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So yes.
I was just going to say, where's the radiation coming from?
The craft. Well, perhaps the energy source that powers the craft.
Yeah, because it wouldn't necessarily have to be sort of like radiation. We would consider like anything like high energy is radiation. So X-rays, very high magnetic field energies. Anything if it's high energy, it would damage cells.
Which, if you've got craft that are capable of interstellar travel, which they would have to be if we're going down this alien hypothesis, and they're coming from other star systems.
Talking high energy.
You need high energy to get from their star to our star, even if you're Alpha Centauri and you're only 4.5 light years away.
Or interdimensional, or some other propulsion system that we don't even understand, or you wouldn't even know how to start talking about. Really,
it seems most likely that the radiation would be linked to the propulsion system on the craft rather than any other system, because I don't think you would need the high level of energy that you'd need for a propulsion system to travel between the stars for anything else in a craft that could travel between the stars. You wouldn't have that as a...
But could it also be related to human activity?
Possibly.
Experimentation.
Yeah, completely.
The regions we're talking about are regions where nuclear weapons were tested. The Americans have already admitted they experiment with, or they used to experiment with radiation on their own citizens.
I think between primarily the Americans and the Russians, we've let off about 2,000 nuclear warheads since since the early 1940s, isn't it?
It's actually ever so slightly shifted the Earth off its axis.
Yeah.
so very slightly, like an inch or something, but maybe that's what's causing climate change?
It could be.
I doubt it, but yeah. The other big name, Linda M. Howe. Now, she turns up in lots of subjects when you're talking about aliens. She's a journalist. She won a local Emmy once.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that.
Yeah, she turns up a lot. Now, she's got several claims. She claims these events, cattle mutilations, have happened all over the world. They've happened throughout time. I can't find her actually giving any details on that, but that's what she claims. And hey, maybe so. I was thinking that the Hindus revere cows, and maybe it could be related to that. They a lot of people say that they think the cow is a deity or they worship the cow. They don't. They consider it sacred, which is a little bit different. But they actually do relate the cow to the mother of all gods, a deity. So
it is quite daft though when the land gives you one really good mammal that you can get meat and dairy and lots of stuff from, and then you make it sacred, so you can't eat it.
Yeah, that seems
it's kind of.
But maybe it's related to the cattle mutilations in history, and we do know from our first episode that we know there were cattle mutilation stories in the UK in the 1600s. So you could argue that it does happen, but I couldn't get much details when I was researching Linda and what she actually claimed.
Okay. I've heard some stories of UFO sightings, not so much cattle mutations, going back even into like the Wild West sort of times when we're out on the frontiers, conquering the western frontier.
Oh, there's one Christopher Columbus on his cruise over to America.
There was, in the 1500s.
A UFO. So, that's a completely different subject, but I would agree with you. Yeah, why not? They haven't just started coming recently.
No. So, that film Cowboys and Aliens. That was supposedly based on a true account, an account from somebody of what happened.
It's a terrible movie.
So, yeah, obviously, it's exaggerated for Hollywood. Yeah. I don't think that they quite probably have the level.
I did wonder that. It's got to be inspired by something. I did wonder that when the film came out, actually.
Yeah. Okay. There is some stories going back to
there's a lot of Native American stories about aliens and UFOs.
Having that kind of alien attack and interaction really happening. Yeah.
We are very shortly going to talk about humans getting attacked by aliens. So, she also talks a lot about cows being the eyewitnesses of seeing cows being dropped from a height from glowing discs, UFOs. But again, even though she says this a lot, she says lots of people have seen this. I can't find any evidence of actually who these people are. So I have to take that with a little bit of a pinch of salt until I actually see actual case. I'm not just taking her word for it. I need to see actual evidence. I need to see actual cases.
You would have thought with smartphones now, with digital cameras as well.
Yeah.
People are going to start capturing these weird things, like a floating cow beneath a saucer, in a field in the middle of nowhere, and then the cow just suddenly drops to the ground.
I would argue that the amount of pictures and things of UFOs have rocketed over the last 10 years, mainly because everyone's got a camera in their pocket. But also because there's a lot more CGI, and the CGI has become much, much easier.
And it's very easy to manipulate digital video now, isn't it? As well,
yeah, very easy.
That's why a lot of the old footage and the old pictures that people got on the old film cameras, and some of that they couldn't doctor that stuff back then like we can now. It's fascinating.
The one thing with Linda M. Howe is she actually did a documentary with the History Channel. When did the History Channel become basically the UFO channel, by the way? They very rarely talk about history anymore. It's all Nazis and aliens on the History Channel. But anyway...
supposedly there's an agenda behind that, but
So she did a documentary for the History Channel. August 25th, 2004, in Nebraska, Farnham, Larry Juergens ranch.
Yeah, probably ranch, yeah.
So she actually found a couple of cattle that day and investigated a couple of cattle that day. No blood, as usual. But unusually, there's these 1/4-inch surgical holes. And when we start talking about humans a little bit later, we're going to come back to this. But these holes that got very clear puncture wounds. And then, where the heart was still in place, but heart muscle was missing, and they believe it may have been took through that. That's not a predator that's done that. That's surgical, which is odd. Tongue missing, but I don't quite believe that, because I know when an animal dies, one of the things that happens is the tongue slips back. So unless there was an actual autopsy, I'm dubious about the tongue. But again, if it was missing, that won't be a predator again, because you would eat around the face first, and it's actually quite a tough muscle. The tongue is one of the strongest muscles in your body.
It's the strongest muscle in our body, anyway, isn't it?
So it's going to be very similar for a cow. So it would be very, very unusual for that to be eaten so cleanly. But I suspect it might have been slipped down the throat. But that would come through an autopsy. And one of the animals' udder was removed, and it was virtually a perfect circular cut where the udder was removed, which I've seen images. It is creepy.
Again, it's surgical precision that's removed. It's not a predator in any way. Then,
well, she actually found 2 cattle very close together. She was doing the way the documentary set up is that she's talking about the one, and then news comes in of another cow. And the next ranch sort of thing is they shoot over to investigate that, and it's very similar in lots of ways. So, but she actually then does try to do experimental, and tries to find evidence. One of the things she does, she sends a lot of her samples off to Dr. Levengood, who's this crazy looking old fellow with a big beard and and she again goes by this thing of this circular indentation that she sees a lot around animals that Chuck was talking about. She gets a magnet and she scrapes around the animal, and she finds really high levels of magnetite and hematite, which are both iron ore minerals. Magnetite is one of the most magnetic. Your magnets are made out of magnetite, basically. So they found 750 times more magnetite than is usual.
Right.
Because this is everywhere. This is an iron ore, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But 750 times. And the hematite they found to be unusually small spheres of it. So it was like 5 to 20 microns, which is quite unusual again. And they found this again in a circular pattern around the animal. She then also talked about this, the ground's ability to hold water was affected, and that the positive ion charge of the ground immediately around the animal was different. More than that as well, she would take plant samples. Now the plant samples were very odd, because some of them, their radiation had affected the plant samples, but some of them had affected negatively. It had actually damaged the ability for the plant to grow, and actually damaged cells. Others, it had accelerated the growth, which is something we do see in radiation sometimes. It can be harmful, but it can actually cause mutations and things. And
that mutation happens to be good for that particular individual.
But again, it seemed to be in a circular pattern. They implied that he knew where the samples had been taken from, which ones were closer to the animal, which ones were further away, before she told him. So he could basically tell the ones closer were damaged, the ones further away were this accelerated growth. And he knew it was a circular pattern before she told him. But again, it's a documentary, and they're trying to have, they have a lot of dum-dum-dums in the episode,
Okay, lots of suspense building moments. Yeah. We believe that in order to have some kind of propulsion system to travel between the stars, we think it might have to unify the theory between electromagnetism and gravity before we fully understand everything well enough to build a drive that could warp space-time and pull you into it like a vortex, faster than the speed of light. I just think because we haven't unified those in physics, and then you're seeing these electromagnetic anomalies at a site where supposedly something's been mutilated, perhaps by an extraterrestrial intelligence, and then you've got these markings on the floor.
We're seeing the effects of that.
We're seeing the effects of that drive that we just don't understand yet.
Okay.
Maybe.
She talked about, and they talked about this thing about a UFO or some sort of object actually connecting the ionosphere to the Earth, like a grounding, and that's where they can also. So then it's like pulling ionic energy from the upper atmosphere, sort of thing, and it's creating like a lightning rod, sort of thing.
And it's
that
recharging.
Energy is what's going into the ground and pulling the hematite and the magnetite up towards the surface, sort of thing. like a vortex. They talk about vortexes a lot.
Okay.
Or magnetic vortices.
Maybe it's part of the recharging process for their propulsion system.
That's how they kind of talk about it, like a recharging process.
Which, if you look at Nikola Tesla's work, that coincidentally was confiscated by the American government after his death.
Yeah. Really quickly.
Yeah. He was looking into this kind of stuff. Like he never wanted all the wires. He thought you could just transmit electricity through the ionosphere.
And he wanted to tap into the natural energy of the planet, didn't he? Basically, and then beam it straight to your house. And he actually built experiments.
So maybe that's what these crafts are doing, and that's why they have to land when they come to the planet. So they orbit. They try and pick a nice quiet spot to land at night in order to create some kind of potential difference and force the energy in the ionosphere to basically lightning strike the craft so that it can take that energy to recharge its propulsion system. Maybe that's why they have to land here.
I would agree with that.
Thought,
I would agree with that, and that's the thing. I'll see this one. Linda has written several books, and one of the books she's written most recently was called Glimpses of Other Realities, Part 2. And she interviewed military intelligence operatives. Doesn't really ever tell you who they are, so again, she could have just made it up, but we'll see.
All right.
She talks about that they've told her that the aliens are testing the animals and looking for high levels of toxins. And they're doing that as a judge of basically how badly we're messing the planet up.
As a barometer, yeah.
As a barometer, good word, I like it. Yeah. And then the government's involvement is they're trying to get involved, trying to avert public panic. So they're trying to, again, distract us from the UFOs by all the helicopters and all the mystery, and then the mystery is designed to stop us from
So this is coming from the other side to what we were saying earlier.
It's a double bluff.
It was like almost. A double bluff almost. Yeah. So that rather than they're trying to scare us in order to fake an alien invasion, they're actually covering up what the aliens are doing, testing the animals, because of what we're potentially doing to the atmosphere and the environment that can harbour life on this planet. I think that seems quite likely to me, because if having the kind of ecosystem that Earth has and the array of wildlife is quite rare within within the galaxy, then perhaps alien species would be interested in protecting the planet that can harbour many different types of life, more than they'd be interested in protecting us as an individual species from going extinct. That holds some weight, I think. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I then, doing the research for this episode, started coming into was actually that it's not always just cows. I knew sheep and things and goats.
The farm animals. Yeah.
But also human beings.
Okay.
And then I started looking into times when humans have actually been
mutilated,
potentially mutilated and murdered by cows.
There's a few
cases by cows. Cows did it, man.
Cows did it.
They're turning. The world has turned.
They've finally had enough of us, so they've turned, have they?
Bloody cows.
That's what the aliens
are doing. The chances
of
being murdered by a cow in your own home are very low, but never zero.
They're surgically enhancing them. They're giving them opposable thumbs. So they can fight back.
So the conclusion to our cattle mutilations is the cows are out to get us. So, yeah, nature.
Be wary of the cows.
Man. Nature balances itself out. So,
yeah.
I found a few cases, and some of them are terrifying. Actually, we're going to do a couple of episodes on these, but we'll touch on them really briefly, because some of them. Claris UFO incidents, 1977, right? There was over 200 incidents where people saw UFOs and were attacked. They were hit by light that seemed to drain their blood, seemed to lower their blood levels. At least 2 people were killed, according to reports. It was investigated by Mexican police, a Captain Uraj. Anyway, they investigated this incident at the time, and they said there was no evidence. But then in 1999, just to add a little bit of woo to this, he was interviewed again, and he said they saw the aliens. They even interacted with a couple of flying saucers during the incident. Just after that, the incident stopped. 3 months later, guess what happened to the captain? Go on, what always happens to anybody that whistleblows and tells a story, that the government don't want you to know.
Did he end up being found mutilated in the field?
No, he hung himself.
Oh, he hung himself.
I think right when you jumped to a very dark place there, then, mate. So he hung himself 3 months after this interview.
Okay.
So nice. Brazil, 1988.
Mm-hmm.
A man that was never identified was found. On autopsy, they'd said that the body had been dead for 72 to 48 hours. It had not been touched by predators.
Okay.
There was no smell from the... so there was no rotting going on, which is, again, odd.
That's very... Yeah, okay.
Do you remember I said about the 1/4-inch surgical holes?
Oh, yes.
This guy had several. So they were about a 1.5-inch circular holes throughout several areas of his body. Again, there was no lips. His tongue was gone.
So these are almost like a puncture, like a lumbar puncture in your spine, where they punch you in to take a
really clean hole.
But they take in something. You know, they're taking spinal fluid, aren't they, with a lumbar puncture? But with this, what they're doing, just taking the bit of skin and muscle and fat and just taking that out with these puncture holes.
Going in and doing like but he was missing
layered sample.
Yeah, he was missing an eyeball, but there was no evidence of scavengers. No blood. They took his scrotum, but not his penis, and I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or not. This guy was never identified, and he was thoroughly investigated. The body was thoroughly investigated.
Maybe there is some kind of like alien species out there, like Predator, that just likes going around killing other species and taking trophies. Just likes hunting big game and taking scrotums as trophies. Exactly. Scrotums, eyeballs, blood,
spine.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh no, man. I think it's the Predator. I think that's it. I've actually had a bloke come to us and say that there is an alien predator. It's real, so I don't know.
Okay.
And then a case that really actually freaked me out a little bit, and it's the Lovett-Cunningham case.
Right.
1956, sorry. So these guys were, one was a captain, one was a sergeant in the Air Force. There'd been a missile test, and they were going out to check the area in New Mexico. Sergeant Lovett went over a sand dune. Cunningham then heard screams. So he ran up the sun dune, and as he got to the top, he saw a 15 to 20 foot, this 20-foot thing again, saucer with some sort of rope or something coming out of it that was grabbed hold of Lovett and was dragging him into the vehicle. There was then a flash of light, and he saw the vehicle move away very, very quickly, and Lovett was gone.
Never saw Lovett again.
No, unfortunately, he was seen again. That's really horrible.
Oh,
so, Lovett reported this back to base immediately.
Yes, of course.
Said they sent out, several people sent out, and a search happened.
Cunningham reported it to base.
Cunningham reported it to base. Lovett
to report it for
I'm on an alien ship.
Can I have me one telephone call?
So, Cunningham, the thing. Now, obviously, while they were looking for the body, before they found it, they suspected Cunningham, and they were interviewing like he was the
murderer. Yeah, of course. Right? Well, it makes sense if he was the only one last seen.
Yeah.
With the alive Mr.
24 hours later, they found Mr. Lovett,
mm-hmm.
and it was about 10 miles away,
mm-hmm.
and he had been badly mutilated. No blood, anus gone. I don't know why they're so obsessed with it, but it was described as the anus had been scooped out.
Lovely.
Yeah. And this is one of the most terrifying cases I've ever come across, and there was never any criminal action against Cunningham. So they can never, if this is a case of murder and in a very elaborate way of getting away with it, he did get away with it.
Which means to suggest that the officials in this case must have believed that he didn't do this.
Or at least couldn't prove it.
Yeah. In which case, that means that they were putting quite a bit of credibility in the fact of the story of what he said happened.
We're going to do a proper episode on this because looking into this, it genuinely terrifies me.
Yeah, I didn't realise I know there was cattle mutilations. I didn't realise there'd been
human
mutilation cases. Yeah. I suppose they keep these even quieter than the cattle mutilations that surface.
You know, and there are lots of cases of deaths where UFOs have been involved that are very, very strange. There's indications in Siberia and all over the world that they're very hard to explain using
conventional understanding of science.
And like I said, if this Cunningham did murder Lovett, and then he didn't just murder him,
he scooped out his anus.
Yeah, which is a bit mental. But like I said,
like
in the next couple of weeks, you'll be seeing a full episode.
Even if he was like some kind of horrific rapist murderer, he'd have probably just raped him after he killed him. Probably not scooped his anus out.
Why are you going with rape? To keep it?
No, but
trophy.
What? So after he. We'll cut that bit.
Really? Right. So.
But that's what it's kind of implying, though, isn't it?
It's gross.
Like, it just doesn't. No.
Conclusion, though, with everything we've talked about, cattle, human mutilations. What's you thinking? Are these sick buggers up to no good?
I don't know. I think it's probably very similar to the UFO thing again, where what was it? Nick Pope at the MOD. 95% of stuff can be explained, 5% can't. I don't know if the percentage will be similar, but I suspect.
I've read stuff that Mufon saying about it's about 50% unexplainable, and I don't believe that for a second. I'm sure that the number is much.
But I'd imagine it's the same. I'd imagine some of it is misidentified predatory behaviour, like where a predator has been in and taken the eyes, but there's not the udder removed or not the testes removed if it's a bull, or do you know what I mean? And it was just the eyes, that kind of thing. But I do think that probably, like Nick Pope says, there is 5% or a certain percentage out there of these cattle mutilations that have happened.
Really mysteries.
Real mysteries. Predators won't go anywhere near them, so it's not predators that have done it.
Yeah. No blood.
No blood.
It's a big one for me.
They've analysed the area. They've seen these indentations of this 15 to 20 foot craft that looks like it's landed nearby. As to whether it's intelligently controlled, it seems very likely that this craft, if it's been mutilating the cattle, is intelligently controlled to land, mutilate the cattle, take what it wanted and go again. Yeah. Whether that's human or whether it's alien, a species from another planet doing this
is up for debate.
I think. I think it's the same as UFO sightings. I think some of the UFO sightings could be misidentified secretive military craft.
I was thinking in the late 80s and 90s we kept seeing triangular UFOs, and then it actually was just the stealth bomber. People were seeing the stealth bomber, you know. And then all of a sudden we went back to flying saucers again. So.
Although I don't know, you should check out the Aurora TR3B and look.
We're going to have to do Black Ops, and
because that does
the SR-73 they think as well.
It does look significantly different from the Blackbird. Yeah. The Aurora TR3B.
The urge to pee has come back really quickly.
We'll just wrap it up and we'll go.
I just gotta wait for it to ease off and then to concentrate.
Oh, you old man.
It'll ease off. Okay, here we go. We're easing off. Yeah, you drinking ain't helping.
What's that sound of liquid?
My feeling is it's like all this with UFOs. I find it really, really interesting and fascinating, but I fear it's probably most of the time nothing that we should be. It's predators and things a lot of the time. But I just think there's that 5% of cases which is worth looking into, and it's scary.
And probably the cases that we've decided to talk about are probably in that 5%.
Yeah,
you know,
possibly.
where we've got some unexplainable. Unexplained removed organs that look like they've been removed with such surgical precision that even the best paid physicians in the world couldn't potentially do that with the current technology. So
that's what I think.
The technology they're using surpasses what we've probably got at the moment, which then makes you question: do we have that technology that's hidden from us, or does someone else have it?
So that's what we think. Please tell us what you think. Please leave a comment. And we'll see you next time.
See you next week.
Thank you. I need to pee. I gotta try to do that without moving the camera.
Yeah, good luck with that.